Free the Angola 2000. And today you have a community of activists that, at their own expense, are visiting you from New Orleans, Louisiana, and it is important to recognize at their own expense. I want to start off by saying a few words by one of the warriors we know, because he brought home a political prisoner we all love, Lynn Stewart. These are greetings to you from Ralph Pointer, the New Abolitionist Movement and the Lynn Stewart Organization, and the Black is Back Coalition. And what he says is many of us, many people around the country, think of slavery as being in the past. But when Lynn Stewart was asked about the coming of the fascist state, she replied, "For a certain segment of our population, the fascist state has never left."
Amen. Amen.
Today, we hope to take a closer look and action to end this slave state that still exists in Louisiana. The recent fight, to abolish Louisiana's Jim Crow 10-2 law and free all of those who were wrongly convicted under it has uncovered injustice that goes far beyond Louisiana. Contrary to what we've all been taught, the 13th Amendment did not end slavery, but permits it as a result of criminal conviction. Slavery was thus shifted from the plantation to the penitentiary, from the South to nationwide, with new slave masters to replace the old, i.e. the U.S. government and Wall Street corporations. It spawned a century and a half of propaganda painting African Americans as criminals and the #1 target of the criminal justice system. This racism allows corporations like McDonald's, Exxon, Victoria's Secret, United Airlines, Walmart, Target, and more than 50 others to make super profits by exploiting slave labor and then extending that exploitation over the rest of the working class. It's not about crime, it's about profit. No matter what color you are, if you are a convict, you are a slave. All this is hidden out in the open, in plain sight of everyone, virtually unchallenged because of the stigma of crime. It is proof of the fact that race is how America does class, and that America has never done away with slavery, as well as why deep racism persists. The people of Louisiana have challenged that racism and slavery by voting out the 10-2 law in last November's election. Louisiana's ruling class has responded by calling for a constitutional convention in 2020. Their intent is undoubtedly to reinstate the 10-2 law in a form that can't be outvoted by the people. 2,000 plus incarcerated citizens weren't grandfathered into the change requiring 12 jurors to convict. Hence, the struggle continues as unanimous is not enough. We, the American people, must support the people of Louisiana in this fight for freedom and bring the innocent home. And of course, we're going to introduce the sister who started all this trouble in the first place. And I want to give you a little background on her. Sister Belinda Parker Brown was born on October 5th, 1959 in New Orleans, Louisiana, to Matthew and Celestine Parker. She and her family later relocated to Michigan, where she lived for 30 years. She has been a long-time activist, advocate for people's rights, and a community organizer. One could say that Belinda has been in the people business for most of her life. Many of you, I want to throw in a little aside here, who are familiar with the struggle of Brother and Reverend Edward Pinckney should know that he was her mentor. She is mentored by Reverend Edward Pinckney, who is still fighting for housing, against Whirlpool, and for good water, and against the subprime loan, and everything else. The police murders, or I should say murders by the Army of Occupation in Benton Harbor, Michigan. So her three basic beliefs are respect for every individual, strive for excellence spiritually and educationally, live for the Lord, and serve your community. Belinda is an educator, researcher, life specialist, community organizer, motivational speaker who spent the majority of her career enhancing the potential of others. Diverse audiences have benefited greatly and responded enthusiastically to Mrs. Brown's wealth of experiences. Along with her partner in crime, Reverend Carl Brown, they have 7 children and has been married for 39 years. And she is the president and chief executive officer of the organization that is bringing this struggle before you today. It's a bipartisan social justice organization whose mission is to champion the protection of human rights, including the civil, constitutional, and societal rights that are all too commonly trampled in today's world. The Louisiana United International speaks for the person or group that cannot speak for themselves and has a proven track record all across the state of Louisiana. She also is a co-host of a talk show of Force for Justice and is a nationally recognized advocate for helping people in need to have their voice heard. She strives to be that voice, that beacon, and hopes that her actions and her life is a beacon for all. I want to go to the biography of our co-conspirator over there in the cause for justice and struggle in Louisiana, Brother Lloyd Kelly. Based in New Orleans, Louisiana, Lloyd Kelly is the executive director of Helping Ourselves Make Economic Strides, called H.O.M.E.S Incorporated. He believes that by developing affordable housing, we empower communities economically, politically, and socially. Partnering with Louisiana United is currently focusing on the Unanimous is Not Enough campaign. The campaign's mission is to secure the freedom of thousands of Louisiana prison inmates who were convicted by a split jury verdict and were not grandfathered in, as we mentioned before. For years, Mr. Kelly has been on the front lines developing policies for issues affecting the Black community in the African American community, criminal justice reform, and he's also been involved in the struggle for access to technology for the Black community. And without further ado, I am Betty Davis. I am a longtime advocate for community control of schools. I'm a member of the New Abolitionist Movement, as I think I said before, and also a recent member of the Black is Back Coalition for Justice. We would appreciate if you would Google that group, and if you're interested in joining us, we're interested in joining you. And we also know I'm a member of the Lynn Stewart organization, which is alive and well and still supporting the freedom of our political prisoners, upon whom all the space that we exercise in terms of liberty, justice, and equality, we are standing on. It is those political prisoners that have given us the space that we have today, and that's why we have to free them, and we have to free them all. So without further ado, Sister Belinda Parker, you are welcome to me.
Wow. Thank you, Sister Betty. Sit back, relax, because this is probably going to be a presentation that you have not experienced, and I know I have been to quite a few of the panels that have happened here in this building throughout this event, and I have met some very powerful, powerful people and leaders that are definitely, without a doubt, moving and shaking this entire country. So with that said, I want you to relax, because this is an action panel. I have some things, some very tangible things for you all to do in here today, okay? But I want to tell you how I met Sister Betty. The first time I met this woman, she was getting off the plane, or we're driving up to a hotel that she had came on her own, used her own money to come to Louisiana to meet me and the rest of my criminal justice task force team, along with Mr. Kelly and many, many others, and Reverend Pickney and Chairman O'Malley. I mean, people just came from all over, California, New York. We had people there from Texas, Mississippi. People came from all over to be a part of our mission to announce this: unanimous is not enough. This is not about me. I can stand here and tell you a whole lot of stories about me, what motivated me and where my passion, the reason why I'm so passionate about the work that I'm doing. Because I want you to know without a doubt, this is about all of us. This is the one that we all can unite on without a doubt. That would bring us all together. Because I know we can win this one. We have the proof that we can win. But it's going to take all of us together to do this. It started in Louisiana, and we can finish it there. And that is what I want you to know. You know, Louisiana should be ashamed of itself. And we want the whole world to know that the criminal justice system in the state of Louisiana is a disgrace. It's a disaster. And we know why. That's the reason why we're here in New York. That's the reason why we came to the Left Forum. Because we feel like this is a breeding ground to get this word spread across the entire country about what's happening to the people in the state of Louisiana. Katrina told the real story about how bad people was treated there. I'm not coming to you with a speech. I want you to know the truth, the real truth about what's really going on. Because so goes Louisiana with the corrupt criminal justice system, so goes the world. It's not just happening there. It's happening all over our entire country. But Louisiana took the lead. They was known as having more people incarcerated than anywhere else in the world. And again, we know why. They were known, the prison, Angola, was known as the most bloodiest prison and the worst prison in the entire country. It was a mockery. Because whenever the slaves would cry out and say, I want to go back home, they said, okay, you're going home. So that's the reason that's how Angola got its name. People are being lynched in the courtroom, literally lynched. Because if they're not shooting them down in the back cold-blooded, they're lynching them in the courtroom. And most of you, this is a national known story.
Alfred Woodfox.
You know this person, Betty, Alfred Woodfox. It was called the Angola 3. Now, the warden, Burl Kane of Angola prison, said that he don't care about the fact, and these are his words. He said the case against the Solidarity does not depend on their innocence, though even if the Angola 3 were murderers, subjecting them to decades of solidarity, confinement, or what the state called closed cells restriction, would still count in a merciless and inhumane, he don't care about that, because the fact that they were held in solitary confinement, the fact that they were held there for almost 40 years, 41 years, don't have anything to do with their innocence. But the reason why, do anybody in here know this story about the Angola 3? Do you know the reason why they put them in solitary confinement for over 41 years?
They were organizing in the prison.
This is his exact words.
Black Panthers.
He said that I would still keep them in confinement. I know that it is still, that I know that they are still practicing Black Pantherism. And I still would not want him working, I would not want them walking around in my prison, because I know that they would organize the young inmates. This man told this story. So Burl Cain is no longer the warden in Angola. And because of the work of this organization, he's up under a comprehensive investigation for running a hellhole, corrupt prison that were torturing people for no reason. I want you all to know here today that this is real. Mr. Kelly, would you come up? I want to tell y'all briefly how I met this man. Because this is what's going to get you fired up. This is what's going to get you fired up, because if it happened to this man, it can happen to anyone in this room. And this is the reason why we're saying that unanimous is not enough. For them to hold these people hostage, kidnapped, inside of the God-forsaken hellhole jails and prisons across the state of Louisiana. I met Mr. Kelly. Okay, it should be up here. We need the password. Do you have the password on the sheet?
I know where it is in another room. You want me to go get it?
I think we had it up here.
I know it was posted in a couple.
Room. Okay, go get it real quick. Okay, while she's going to go get that for us, and we're going to get our PowerPoint up, but I'm going to lead right into one of the main reasons why we're saying that unanimous is not enough. And when I met Mr. Kelly, and what really got him fired up to be a part of this great work that we're doing. He has a story, but we have a story that we want to share, what really got us moving in the right direction to get these people free.
It actually started, unanimous is not, it led to us being here today.
Absolutely. And that is the story of Mr. Earl Victor. Earl and Tanya Victor. And I just want to, the story is a long, horrific, it's a horrifying story, but the story is so outrageous. It's so sickening. It's so, I can't even describe the words that, that would.
This is for Wi-Fi. I don't know if this will work on the computer, but
Thank
the
you.
password is that right there.
Okay, all right, put the password in.
I don't know if this is the same for the computer. It's Wi-Fi.
The lady's name?
Katrina.
Katrina. Carl, can you go and find Katrina, please?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
You want to try the password?
Yeah, it's for the one.
Yeah, right, it's her computer, and I think it might be
It's not on
access
the
for-
internet. It's not on the
Thought I could
internet. Okay, go tell the story. Start the story.
Okay.
Katrina, be here.
All right, you know how technology is, and then we,
You can
but,
grab those in my notes too.
oh, okay, there, it's asking for the password of the university.
I just gotta grab my notes. I'm so sorry. My notes there.
Okay,
Thank you.
real quick.
So sorry.
Mr. Earl and Tanya Victor were prominent business owners in their community. It was called St. John the Baptist Parish.
Has anybody ever heard of St. John the Baptist Parish, Louisiana, except for you three over there? Has anybody ever heard of, okay, one person. Now I want you to keep in mind every single thing that you would think of someplace called St. John the Baptist Parish, Louisiana, backwater, swamp land, is exactly what we're talking about. Go ahead, Belinda.
They were prominent. This man was on his way to becoming a multi-millionaire.
He was already a multi-millionaire.
Right, he was already a multi-millionaire, but he was getting ready to, St. John the Baptist sat right outside of New Orleans. It's like a corridor right outside of New Orleans, where New Orleans is congested. So if you're out there in this area and you're gonna build homes for,
He had sold 23.
$1 million homes for people,
23 to
this is the place that you would want to be, right outside the city. Beautiful. Mr. Victor's first wife died, and they had six children. He married his second wife that had 4 children, right. And in that union, they had 2 more children. All of these children were boys.
They had a total of 13.
They had a total of 13 boys. And Mr. Victor's boys were, I mean, just very well-mannered children. I mean, they were just well-educated because, you know, he was making sure that his boys were going to be the legacy.
Can I
the
tell
legacy
a
that
quick
he
story?
leave, right.
Okay, one of Mr. Victor homeschooled all of his children. All of their lives, he homeschooled them. So when Emmanuel got to the age to go to college, he wanted to be an architect. So he applied to Louisiana State LSU in their architecture department. It was LSU or Southern. At any rate, you know, when you go to apply to architecture school, they want to see your portfolio. So again, homeschool. He sends his portfolio in. They called him back to ask, can they use his work as their flyer, their promotional materials. That's how good Mr. Victor was with his kids.
And Mr. Victor he also scored a 35% on his SAT. Mr. Victor was, I mean, brilliant.
Is brilliant.
He is brilliant. And he was the one that wrote the legislation or the language
That
for
became 10-2.
the 10-2, that we were successful in getting the law changed. And I know Betty read you the history of that, but that was an unconstitutional racist Jim Crow law that was schemed up to literally snatch people off the street, especially black people,
In 1880,
and put them in prison and make slaves out of them.
because of the exception to the 13th Amendment of the United States. Is there anyone here that is unclear on what the exception to the 13th Amendment is? Okay. The U.S. Constitution, the 13th Amendment, is the amendment that freed the slaves. So it says that there shall be no slavery in the United States except for people that are incarcerated. And I'd like to ask you this one little question that nobody ever puts together. And that's what I do. I sit around and try and put things together, connect dots. So if 1/3, 1 out of 3, 1, 2, 3, black men go to prison between 17 and 35, is that by coincidence or is that by design? Because when I'm in prison, a bunch of corporations get free labor. And I can make some sheets, and I can do some railroad ties, and I can make little chips for these computers, and I get about 6 cents an hour. And y'all buy those computers for about $900 a piece. That's what's happening with the exception to the 13th Amendment.
We know for a fact that people can work for 4 cents a day and make someone billionaires inside. And everybody knows it. Everybody been talking about it. But the fact of the matter is that the federal government pays people For you to be incarcerated, it probably costs the taxpayers about $40,000 a year per inmate. Per year. In order for them to receive that federal government money, they have to have a 97% occupancy. So what they do is trade people around like cattle. If you don't have your 97%, well, I got 3 people that I can send you so you can make your quota and get your money. And then when my quota is down, we can switch them around.
What did you do?
So in other words, when people tell you that they get in the system and it's hell getting out, once you get in the system, you become a number. That's all.
Okay.
That's DOC number.
Belinda, can you tell about Mr. This is
Yeah, we're
Mr.
on Mr. Victor first page, right there.
This one?
Right.
Go this way.
And I want you to click on the music. This is a song that Mr. Victor wrote.
Okay, music, we have technical difficulties, but that's Mr. Victor's house
Right there.
that he built, him and his boys. I am so dying for her to hurry up and get to the story because
Okay.
y'all will be as angry as I am every time we talk about this. I just get pissed off
Okay.
again.
What I do is just clear the go. Okay. Okay, this is Mr. Victor's house, and this was this was his house, and all in that corridor on that street where he had built like about 80 homes similar to this. What Mr. Victor had did, since he was so brilliant, anybody know the New Orleans Saints? Anybody heard of the Saints? Sure. New Orleans Saints. Okay, where 18 of these Saints players were millionaires. They became partners with Mr. Victor. After his first wife died, he invested her, she died of cancer, and he would have paid anything to keep his wife alive. But he invested his money in land. So he bought like 1,000 acres of land, and he went and negotiated with these Saints players to become partners with him to build homes for them. And he was on his way to building a strip mall that would actually open up the economic development for a black community.
It was a $56 million deal, and that's going to be very important. In about 2 minutes, that's going to be very important. Go ahead.
So, Mr. Victor had a tragedy. And they took Mr. Victor's tragedy and made it a nightmare. You see the young boy with the big cheesy smile back there, this one here?
On the left.
His name is M.L. He had been suffering from asthma since he was born.
But it was
These
undiagnosed.
are the children. These are the 4
Undiagnosed.
boys of his second wife.
Undiagnosed.
Undiagnosed. Right?
It was undiagnosed. That's very important in the story.
Very, very, very important. They took this man's tragedy and made it a nightmare, people, because he was arrested and charged with the murder or the death of his child.
He and Tommy were.
Wait a minute, hold up. Mr. Victor was not even home. He was at his office when his wife called and was saying that the child was having difficult breathing. He tells her, well, give him some water. You're trying to get him, put some water on him, calm him, get him, cool down. Maybe he's hyperventilating or whatever. She tried those things. She called him back, said, well, honey, I think you need to come on home. We need to rush him to the hospital. He said, well, go ahead, get him prepared. I'm on my way. I'll be there in less than 5 minutes. He's flying down the highway to get to the house. He gets home. He realized that there was nothing he could do. The child was gasping for breath. They put the child in the car, rush him to the hospital, still alive. Get to the hospital, and here they go. Well, anybody ever been to the emergency room and they ask you all these questions? Where's your medical insurance card? Sign these documents. You know, you gotta give us authorization to do this, to do that. Mr. Victor said, whatever you have to do, see to my child now, because I will take responsibility. Whatever you have to do.
He didn't say, I'll take responsibility. He said, and this is.
I'll be responsible.
No, he said, it's in the record, I'm responsible. Go ahead, I'm responsible, which is different than I'll be responsible. He said, I'm responsible. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Now, guess what? The child dies.
And that term is misinterpreted.
The child dies. And before they can even have a death determination, they arrest Mr. Victor right there at the hospital.
So y'all understand the coroner has not even ruled on what the cause of death is, but Mr. and Mrs. Victor are arrested on first-degree murder charges. Yes, ma'am.
Now we want interaction. You got a question? Go ahead.
Yeah,
Real quick.
Actually, it's kind of new to me, but where I come from, like what you just saying, a lot of child died, like what you're saying, they ask questions, insurance said if they don't happen, the children will die. So they have to have the money, have what they need, but if you treat the children, if they don't happen, the children do die. So from where I come from.
And in this case, right, he died.
So,
Okay. It was no death determination. Mr. Victor get arrested at the hospital. Immediately they arrest him and takes him to jail and charge him. What was the first charge?
The first-degree murder.
First-degree murder. Okay. Now, long story short, we got to line this up. Mr. Victor, he beats it.
A judge rules.
A judge rules, said that there was no
Evidence.
of a crime
Of a
being
homicide.
committed.
Of
Of
a
a
hom-
homicide.
That's what she
None
said,
whatsoever.
homicide.
So the judge quashed the case, dismissed it, threw it out. But by this time, Mr. Victor has spent millions of dollars fighting this case. Had probably made about over 100 court appearances. His children had been snatched away from him by Child Protective Services. They had adopted his kids off, and he
Two babies.
did not even know where his son was buried. So Mr. Victor and his wife files a
Civil suit.
civil suit for $500 million.
Something like that. It's between 100 and 500.
Okay, here we go. I got it right here. In this civil suit, Mr. Victor named them all. He names them all because the very next day, the bank calls for all of his loans. Take all of his money out the bank.
Okay, this is St. John the Baptist Parish in Louisiana.
Okay.
And they can do stuff like that there. Don't go.
All right. So he sues the bank, he sues the Child Protective Services, and Mr. Victor is free. So they called for a meeting with Mr. Victor and tells him, if you don't drop this, we're sending you to Angola for the rest of your life. And Mr. Victor is doing life in Angola for a crime he did not commit. They gave him life and gave his wife 40 years.
Excuse me.
Now listen, people. Listen. Interaction, come on, what you got to say, baby?
Question. So they call him, they tell him they will send him to jail. There's no court proceedings. They just.
Oh!
No, wait a minute. Good question.
Good question.
This man went to Angola before he was even convicted of anything. But what they did was bring the charges back on,
Instead of first-degree murder, they charged him with second-degree murder, went to another judge, and got her to sign off on it.
now guess who the judge was?
Yeah, hold on, because I get to tell that part. The judge's name is Mary Hotard Becknell. Remember that name. Let's all say it together. Mary Hotard Becknell. Go ahead.
The judge was the wife.
No, hold on. Remember she said Mr. Victor was extremely successful real estate developer? No, Mr. Victor was the #1 real estate developer in St. John the Baptist Parish. Go ahead and tell me, Belinda. Tell me.
And the judge,
Guess who's #2?
His wife.
husband,
The judge's husband
was
is
number
#2.
Oh, the judge's husband.
Is the #2 real estate developer in St. John the Baptist Parish, Louisiana. And this judge did not believe that she had a conflict of interest and refused to recuse herself.
She
Okay.
was the one that sentenced Mr. Victor to life in prison and gave his wife. Now listen, by this time, I'm telling you, Mr. Victor is broke now. He done joined up with LUI. And the reason why we're telling this story is because I was there for the whole 10 days of the trial. Mr. Kelly was there. Now this is the part you got to get to your question. We got Mr. Victor an attorney that was willing to take his case after all the attorneys had just robbed him of his money. Because now, I'm going to the governor, I'm going to all of the legislation, I'm meeting with everybody, telling them that we need help with Mr. Victor's case, because this man is innocent. Guess what they told me? They said, remember, they're gonna get him. He going to prison. Do you know who he messing with? So, the attorney that did agree to go on Mr. Victor's case, he gets to the courthouse the morning of the trial. The judge tells him, if you're not ready to go to trial, I advise you to not even
To recuse, she
to
said.
accuse yourself and not even put your motion in to enroll. Immediately, that would be ineffective counsel for him because he ain't never met Mr. Victor.
Could lose his
He only
license.
came on my word. So Mr. Kelly was with me. Guess who the judge?
No. That part I'm telling. No. Okay, so what happened was Mr. Victor and I had never heard of Mr. Victor until 6 o'clock that morning. She calls me and says, would you go to court with me? And one of the things that she has left out of this story that is so very important about LUI and how it really got involved is this woman, by herself pretty much, organized the community to ultimately get rid of the okay, we don't have counties like y'all have, we have parishes. So she got rid of the parish coroner, she got rid of the parish district attorney, and the sheriff is on his way to jail as we speak.
Yes.
All corrupt. Thank you, Belinda Parker Brown. So when you talk about LUI and the work that we've done, that's the work that we do. Anyway, I'm thinking we're going to the federal courthouse to get Walter Reed, the DA at the time, our district attorney. She says, no, we're going to St. John the Baptist Parish. Okay, where's that? Because I've only been in Louisiana about 6 months. I said, where's that? She told me, I said, okay, it's a murder trial. Oh, we get there, lawyer has been dropped, so I'm that guy that thinks quickly on his feet, and I just said, okay, fine, we can't argue over spilled milk. So, voir dire, everyone know what voir dire is?
Of course.
That's when they start picking a jury. I start writing questions to Mr. Victor, because he's representing himself now. So I'm like, ask him this question. Ask this question. Okay, he said this, and when he took the first one, he looked at me like, who the hell are you? I've never seen you before, but I'm handing to him. 10:30 comes. Judge calls a recess, and she gives us 15 minutes. Well, I take 20 because, CP time, and I was smoking. So I come back about 5 minutes, about 5 minutes late, and I'm walking to my seat, and the judge says, Mr. Washington. Keep walking to my seat. Mr. Washington. Keep walking to the seat. Finally, I sit down, and the bailiff taps me on the shoulder and says, "The judge is speaking to you." And I said, "Oh no, my name is not Mr. Washington. I promise you, this is what she said. It doesn't matter." And I said, "Well, my name is Mr. Kelly." And she said, "Well, Mr. Kelly, I'm assigning you to assist Mr. Victor with his case. Do I have lawyer written on my chest?" I did not know the man. First of all, that's not supposed to happen. It's just not. She assigned me to assist him. At that moment, that's when I became passionate about Errol and Tanya Victor, because we knew what time it was. We knew what time it was. And every bad thing that you could think of that could possibly happen, it probably did during that trial. And this woman's about to lose her mind if we don't wrap it up. So that is the story of Errol and Tanya. Oh, one quick other thing. Belinda, let me go through this real fast. Mr. Victor, she told you earlier that Mr. Victor is extremely brilliant. Well, Mr. Victor didn't take it sitting down. He went to Angola. But he went to Angola's library and started doing his research. And he's the one that came up with the concept of 10-2. Mr. Victor came up with that concept, reached out to us.
Wait, before you get to that point. The reason why he came up with that concept is because Mr. Victor's jury
There you go, tell me.
came out with a 3-9 verdict. And the court got excited. And by the way, I almost went to jail that day.
And many other days.
Because the judge wanted to put a gag order on the media. She didn't want no media in the courtroom. Now, I'm a court watcher. Okay, by registration, certified court watcher. That's what I do. She tells me that I would not be allowed back in the courtroom. I told her, I stood up.
I'm like, we're in St. John the Baptist Parish. We're
The
going to
court
jail.
belongs to the people. And if you think you're going to put me out this courtroom, I'm fit to go to jail. Here, Mr. Kelly, here go my purse, my keys. Call my husband and tell him I'm fit to go to jail. Come and get
I
me.
was like they're really going to let me make a phone call, but go ahead.
The point is, listen, people, we're not making this up.
We're not.
Okay? This happened for real. So, Mr. Victor jury came out with the decision 3-9. Now, 3-9 is automatically a hung jury. Mr. Victor and
In
his wife
Louisiana.
get to go home. The judge get mad. She stands up on the bench, hit the gavel, and force them to go back in there and tell them they better come back out with a decision. Guess what they came back out with? The 10-2. Mr. Victor was convicted up under the 10-2 split jury verdict. That is only 2 states in the whole country that did that. And Louisiana took the lead. That's why we're telling you people, we know why. So Mr. Victor goes to prison. He's brilliant. He was the ones that studied, he studied the law. He wrote the language for the Amendment 2 to be passed back in November of 2018, saying that it was a racist, unconstitutional Jim Crow law and that they schemed it up.
Can you, at this point, for just a second, can you come up and talk about?
Is that Mimi?
Yes.
Hey, Mimi!
Can you come up and talk about the 13th Amendment and all of that?
I have to say, you don't have a clue. I am so honored. I am so honored. This sister is on the front lines every day, and we think we know what it means to be on the front lines. Tammany Parish, Louisiana. I'll just start with her son. This is just common occurrence. Her son is picked up, he's arrested in protest, and he's incarcerated. And where is he put into? Has anybody ever heard of a squirrel cage? Squirrel cage. A squirrel cage is a 3 by 6 foot animal cage, a 3 by 6 foot cage, where people in Louisiana have been kept in solitary or incarcerated just in general. Her son is 6'4", weighs 285 pounds. There's an indefinite time that you are put in the squirrel cage. Louisiana has just ceded, I have to say, the highest rate of incarceration in the country to Oklahoma. Sorry, sis, you're second. But it's the highest.
We did that, right.
And I don't want to repeat, I'm sorry I came late, but I do want to say why I came late. It wasn't entirely my fault, but there is something else which really goes to this, and we give feedback in the 10 for 2 in the 13th Amendment. I had just come from a memorial service for Layleen Polanco. Layleen Polanco was a trans woman who got in an altercation with a backward reactionary cab driver. She was then arrested for misdemeanor assault. Put in Rikers Island, this was in April, early April, held on $500 bail. I mean, all of this means something. Misdemeanor assault means nothing. $500 bail means nothing if you ain't got it and you've got a system that is disproportionately putting on bail on people who do not have it. And that's one of the critical things we have to work against, the elimination of that bail system, which is strictly a system of impoverishment. Nothing else. It's about poor people. If you are arrested for aggressive begging, which means that you are what? You are homeless. That's all it means.
Right.
And maybe panhandling. Do you know what you need to get out? You need a $125 surcharge, which is put on the system. An economic fee in order to get out for panhandling as a homeless person.
All right.
It's amazing. You know, I was carrying my little African-American annotated by Gloria Brown Marshall, who was a wonderful instructor and theoretician. You should read her books, brilliant woman, teaches at John Jay College. Carrying my little Constitution around. And it's annoying. It's annoying. It's all these big, wordy things. And then you get to the 13th Amendment. And the 13th Amendment is exactly one sentence. What did the 13th Amendment presumably do? Free slaves. But within one darn sentence, you think it would be longer? You think it would be more meaty, more substantive? How many bills, how many pieces of legislation have you ever looked at that are verbose? So I know it's been said, but I want to say it again.
And I want my students to be sure they write this part down.
Okay.
This is the critical piece.
Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except, this isn't my politics, this is the framers. What could they have been thinking? Except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. 1865, there wasn't a mass incarceration. There wasn't a mass system of jailing, etc. for African Americans. Well, we know why. Obviously, they were dispersed and they would chattel amongst the plantations, notwithstanding up south, the north as well. But listen to that. I mean, it's in the first 5 words. Except. So what were they doing? What the heck was slavery? It was an economic system.
Yes.
And then it was a system when you treat people as chattel and economics, you have to control them. Well, they left that to the plantations at that juncture. when it was formally institutionally eradicated the plantation system, which had had much to do with the contention with industrialization from the north and a different mechanism for production. Well, what did they do? They needed two things. They needed to deal with a reserve army of labor who was still the backbone of the South.
There it is.
And they were going to do what? They were going to develop every single one of the Jim Crow laws. Oh, how clever capitalist entrepreneurialism is. The Jim Crow laws weren't initially as a mechanism of social control for a arrested population. That's there too. But it was specifically and demonstratively to take the African ancestry labor and harness it. Because what was the penalty in almost every single case as the economic system of the South fell apart post-slavery? Still had migrant workers, etc., but it fell apart essentially in that systemic way, the plantation structure. Aside from Angola, which is on 1 million acres, that Angola prison farm, it still is the plantation. It hasn't changed. If people don't know or have never seen it, do you know it has its own banks, its own schools? It's a small city, not so small. But we'll get to that in a minute. But I just want to specify that the evolution of the system of mass incarceration comes from this permission to re-harness and effectively use as chattel black labor. And how do you do that? You develop every kind of, we understand, Jim Crow law. 5 people hanging out together, spitting on a sidewalk, alleged disrespect, all coming out of kind of white supremacist concepts. So you begin to now amass a body of labor that feeds into, not just in the South and not just the Angola prison farms, but all over the country, a way of putting together black bodies with de minimis, concocted laws, Jim Crow laws, but our own laws now. The laws that put our Latina trans sister into Rikers, where she died. All of it is based on, and this is the ideological framework. We never, in actuality, except it's typical of America, we're so good in capitalism. We're all about branding. We're all about the fraud of labels. So we abolished slavery, except that we invented a system of laws that was capable of incarcerating people into the development of the system of mass incarceration. And of course, we know, but sometimes the numbers are staggering.
Thank you.
We have a system of involuntary slavery, involuntary servitude, which persists 154 years later. And it is the essential loophole that shifted the practice to U.S. prisons. And I don't know how much more time you want to take, please.
Can I ask a question real quick? Is there anybody in this room that does not understand what she said and the ramifications of what she just shared with us? Please, this is the time to say, I'm kind of slow, I don't get it. Because I will do that. When I don't understand, I will ask you. So please.
I just want to confirm and say, and that's what they're doing in New York City right now with the MTA. They're going to confirm that they're going to have a nice youth population in jail because they're saying, we're going to really pay for our system. If you walk through the turnstile without paying, you're going to, that's okay.
I just want to say 2 more things before I believe I cede back to my sister. And that is, Lupe, in what you're saying, I'm a legal aid lawyer for 35 years. Who do we put in prison? Who's in Rikers Island? The overwhelming number of the arrests continue to be, notwithstanding de Blasio stop and frisk, misdemeanor marijuana arrests, which are easy as punch for the cops, and it continues unabated, and it's racially based in the extreme. That's
Absolutely.
essentially the
That's it,
numbers of
baby.
arrests and who is populating the Rikers Island jail, which of course should be closed immediately. But I
Wow.
also wanted just to really segue back into you. In Angola, 2,000 people, and then there's so much to be said but it's more important to listen to my comrades here. In Angola, 2,000 people, 2,000 men
Actually, we
have been
said-
given.
Those are just the people that we have vetted. Our
I was
organization
gonna
have
get to
vetted
that,
those, right.
absolutely. Have been.
That
That's
we
why I'm
know
gonna
that.
let you take it in a minute. But I just wanna segue back. As a result of the 10-2 ruling, and you got that.
Say
That means what the 10-2 ruling is, because I'm not sure it's always clear, you're supposed to have a unanimous jury to be able to convict somebody of for life imprisonment. And almost every state does. Again, we have issues with Oklahoma and Louisiana, etc. Nevertheless, and in Louisiana, they didn't have. You could have two people, and it was a very convenient way of saying we're not even having all white juries. We'll have two people of color on the jury, and they will be the ones who will vote against the conviction, but it doesn't matter because all you need is 9 to vote for life imprisonment. So it went to the Supreme Court. Aside from local demonstrations and stuff, it went to the Supreme Court. Hey, that means a lot, right? And the Supreme Court ruled it's unconstitutional. But of course, what they never ruled is that it's retroactive. But they didn't have to, and that's the struggle. So there are at least 2,000 people which have been vetted by this extraordinary organization that have been convicted under an unconstitutional law as upheld by even the Supreme Court of the U.S. 2,000 on this jury, which is supposed to be the essence of the promise of democracy and due process. And it is our job to support these champions of social activism whose son does wind up getting put in a squirrel cage, who give all of themselves in a brutal and vicious state to make sure that, to begin with, the 2,000 people that are being held under this unconstitutional law are let the hell out. And one good thing, damn Burl Cain, who's for decades been the head of Angola prison, and the Atlantic magazine and these liberal magazines had things about how wonderful Burl Cain is because he brought religion to these poor people who were doing life in jail. And what did he bring? The work ethic. The work ethic. And Atlantic magazine has a whole damn video on how wonderful it is because it gives them something to do. Damn you. Well, Burl Cain now, finally after decades and even being extolled as this plantation overseer, he's the great savior. He brought the work ethic to men trapped under unconstitutional laws of white supremacy. So Burl Cain now, been indicted, right on, and it's really the kind of work that they've done. Yes, the sheriff, the coroner, the DA, and the damn Burl Cain, who's ruled over Angola prison farm for decades.
Thank you,
Safe way, as they say. Gone.